So I asked ChatGPT to come up with 3 really interesting questions to ask me, and this is what it came up with.
In the field of offensive security, it can be tricky to keep people motivated in what's often a behind-the-scenes role. How do you inspire and maintain morale among your team, especially when wins are usually about the things that nobody actually sees?
So I did this video where I suggested that leading a pentest team is somehow comparable to being a referee, and I guess there's some similarities there, not necessarily negative ones. So, for example, if a referee has a great game, no one knows the referee's there. That's kind of the point, and everyone complains about the game when the referee's intervened or whatever else. So, I suppose behind the scenes role suggests that it should be an indication of success is the fact that no one knows you're doing your job. With inspiring and motivating, then there's a degree of empathy there, isn't there? I mean, if you're trying to inspire and maintain morale, then it's important to have an empathy with the people that you're providing the leadership for. In particular with pentest teams, there's the nature of the work is that it's very involved and very focused, and often you kind of do have to get out of the way to let people do their work, and with the nature of the levels of pressure and timelines and timescales associated with delivery, it is best to let people get on with it. So largely, you motivate people by getting out of their way and having empathy for what they're doing and some shared experience as well, which I think is also relevant.
Leading a team of penetration testers sounds like herding some of the most creative, analytical minds out there. What's one lesson in leadership you've learned that surprised you? And has it changed how you approach managing technical talent?
Herding. Your words, not mine, ChatGPT. Yeah, there's a lot of creative analytical minds in OffSec, as there are in other fields. The one lesson, if there is one lesson that I learned in leadership of such teams, is how challenging it can be, but how easy it looks from the outside. So I've in the past I've worked with other team leaders, people in the industry who, it seemed to me they weren't doing a great deal, but then when you actually try doing it yourself, you realize how challenging it is, and that's perhaps an indication that someone's doing their job to a high standard as they make it look easy. How does it change how I lead or manage those sort of teams? Well, it hasn't changed it. It's informed it. There's no kind of secret source, or there's no simple answer to that. This is the textbook how you manage teams like this. This is the ABCs of how you get the most from people. Really, you're kind of a facilitator, if that's the right word. You're an enabler, a conductor. That's your role, really. And yes, there are other things. There are other kind of personal human things like conflict resolution and getting people to talk to each other and all those other things. But the reality is that you work hard so that it looks easy. That's the thing that I learned, and it's a great thing to work with people who are high performing individuals. That's one of the privileges of leading a team like that, is you get to work with really smart people and you continue to learn from them. Maybe that's the other thing. Maybe that's the other thing I've learned about leadership, is that you continue to learn from the people in your team. You reach a certain level of capability and experience yourself, but in our field, that's just the next step. That there's always more to learn. And when you move into leadership, one of the coolest things perhaps is learning from the people that you're leading.
With security constantly evolving, junior penetration testers need to upskill quickly. What do you think is the most effective way to transform technical rookies into trusted consultants in a short time frame? And what role does mentorship play?
So I like this question because, in a way, I don't agree with the idea that constantly things are evolving, therefore no one can keep up. That's true to some extent. Things do move a lot in the offset world and the cybersecurity world in general. They do. That's true. I can't say that they don't, but there's this idea that somehow none of us are going to keep up, and it's all going to end in a heap, and that it's an impossible task to know everything. Well, you don't have to know everything. That's a false ambition. No one's going to get there by knowing everything. But I believe what does happen quite a bit, certainly in the offset world and with juniors, is that some learning paths that I've seen focus on quite narrow, quite shallow, shall we say, content in terms of like tool usage, and this is how you do this is how you get this exploit to work, and so on, without ever really delving into the why of it all. And it turns to the question of what's the most effective way. Well, the most effective way is to understand some sound theoretical principles of things like networking and of applications architecture and of modern IT and applications architecture. Those are the things. If you understand those things, then you can then start to understand about the discussion about vulnerabilities and about how those things can be deconstructed and exploited in some way. Then you can have that discussion. But before you know that, you're not really in a position to understand why something works. And certainly when I interview candidates for roles, I will ask questions to the technical assessment questions will all be around the question of why does this work, and what do you think's happening here, rather than a simple how do you make this happen? Because how do you make this happen is a press of a button or the running of a script. So the answer is make sure that people understand those sound fundamentals first, and then if you've got that fundamental base or you're willing to acquire it, then the changes that happen are just simply variations on that, and you're already in a good place because you understand why everything works. In terms of mentorship is a big deal in our industry, and certainly that's something I have a lot of time for. I don't think mentorship is necessarily a team leader responsibility exclusively. I think mentorship is something which can happen at every level, and it's not a seniority discussion, it's an experience discussion. So people who have the right work in the right environment where mentorship is required and is rewarded, then it can be very, very useful. And people do tend to, I found this a lot particularly with in the offset world, people do tend to want to share knowledge. If you can speak to them in the right way, people do cooperate and want to collaborate. So that desire is already there, and mentorship is just a route through which you enable that to happen.